War movies love to bend the truth. They trim the boring parts, pump up the drama, and hope you don't notice the historical shortcuts. But every now and then, a film refuses to play fast and loose with reality. It digs in, sweats the details, and delivers a battle scene so accurate it feels like you're there. So, which ones nailed it? Stay tuned, because a few of these were so real, even the people who lived them couldn't watch twice. We Were Soldiers, 2002, Battle of Iwo Jima, 1965. Hollywood has a habit of smoothing over the rough edges of history. This one doesn't. We Were Soldiers drops you straight into the chaos of Landing Zone X-Ray, where 400 American troops found themselves surrounded by a North Vietnamese force nearly 10 times larger. This was the Vietnam War's first major battle between the U.S. Army and the North Vietnamese Army, and it's recreated here with the kind of grit that leaves no room for glamour. Mel Gibson plays Lieutenant Collier's Hal Moore, but the real magic comes from the film's relentless attention to detail. The helicopters dropping troops into a killing zone, the deafening mix of gunfire and radio chatter, the desperate calls for air support, it's all built from eyewitness accounts, most notably from Joseph Galloway, a war correspondent who was actually there. Galloway even has a character in the film, and while he praised its accuracy, he admitted he had to walk out during one scene. "That was my nightmare for 36 years, he said. The production didn't just cast anyone in the enemy roles. They brought in Vietnamese actors who had actually served in the North Vietnamese Army. The film even visually represents every soldier from Moore's company, whether or not their names are spoken on screen. Sure, there's one big liberty, the dramatic bayonet charge at the end. U.S. troops hadn't used that tactic since the Korean War, and the movie stops before the bloodiest part of the campaign, Landing Zone Albany, where casualties spiked even higher. But what's here captures the chaos, the confusion, and the sheer desperation of the real battle. You walk away not just entertained, but shaken. Battle of Britain, 1969, the aerial dogfights of 1940. If you've ever watched a war movie and thought, that plane looks fake, this film will ruin you for all others. The Battle of Britain doesn't rely on models or CGI. They flew the real thing, actual Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Messerschmitts, restored, painted, and roaring across the sky exactly as they did during the summer of 1940. Director Guy Hamilton, working with Royal Air Force veterans, refused to cut corners. Even trainer aircraft were modified to look like enemy planes. Every dogfight you see is shot in the real sky with real hardware, choreographed to match the actual battle maneuvers used by both sides. The aerial scenes aren't just accurate, they're beautiful, with the kind of authenticity you can't fake. But it's not just about the planes. The film nails the human details most productions would skip. You see foreign pilots in the RAF exactly as they were, including the famous moment when Polish pilots ignored orders and dove straight into combat. That really happened. You also see a downed pilot arrested by his own allies because they didn't recognize him, another true incident. In 1969, many battle records were still classified, yet the filmmakers still managed to capture the operational feel of the campaign. The chaos of scrambled orders, the tense radio chatter, the exhaustion on the ground crew's faces, it's all there. And because they didn't cut away to overly dramatize subplots, the tension builds naturally. Battle of Britain is the rare war film that treats its subject like history, not a backdrop. It's a living, breathing reenactment with the hardware, tactics, and tiny truths intact. If you want to see what the real Battle of Britain looked like, this is as close as you'll ever get without a time machine. Glory, 1989, Assault on Fort Wagner, 1863. Most Civil War movies lean on big speeches, heroic charges, and slow-motion glory shots. Glory doesn't flinch from the brutality. It tells the story of the 54th Massachusetts, the first black regiment in the Union Army to see real combat, and its assault on Fort Wagner in 1863. The film's climactic battle scene doesn't just look right, it feels right. The uniforms? Historically accurate down to the buttons. The timing of the assault? Matched to actual accounts. The fact that Colonel Robert Gould Shaw was buried in a mass grave alongside his men? That's here too, exactly as it happened. While some supporting characters are composites, The events are lifted straight from military records and eyewitness testimonies. The 54th's attack was a brutal frontal assault. They actually reached the parapet of the fort, got inside, and were driven back under devastating Confederate fire. Nearly half the regiment was killed, wounded, or captured. And after that day, the Union stopped wasting soldiers in head-on charges like this, switching to a siege instead. The production team didn't just throw actors into uniforms and call it a day. They shot on location in Georgia and South Carolina with Civil War historians on set. Reenactors, many of them experts, filled out the ranks, giving the battle sequences a depth that comes from people who live and breathe the history. Studios almost killed the film before it started, convinced no one would watch a war movie centered on black soldiers without a white hero front and center. They were wrong. Glory pulled in $27 million, earned 5 Oscar nominations, and took home 3, including Denzel Washington's first Academy Award. It's not just historically accurate, it's a turning point in how the Civil War has been shown on screen. Platoon, 1986, New Year's Day Battle, 1968. Platoon doesn't come from someone imagining what Vietnam was like. It comes from someone who was there. Oliver Stone served in the war, and his final battle sequence is based on the New Year's Day Battle of 1968, a chaotic nighttime firefight that left soldiers fighting for their lives in total disarray. Sure, it's a dramatized version. No war movie ever escapes that entirely, but the bones are real. Stone pulled directly from his own memories and those of other veterans. He brought in Dale Dye, a former Marine combat correspondent who saw the battle firsthand, not just as an advisor, but as the drill instructor for the cast, and this wasn't Hollywood boot camp. Dye kept them sleep-deprived, muddy, and miserable, so they'd look and act like men who'd been chewed up by war. The battle scene doesn't follow the neat arcs you see in other films. There's no perfect formation, no clean lines of fire, just chaos. Flashes of muzzle fire in the dark, screaming over the noise, soldiers not even sure where the enemy is. The scene captures how quickly control can evaporate and how survival boils down to instinct. It's also one of the few Vietnam War depictions that shows the crushing mental strain alongside the physical danger. The exhaustion on the soldiers' faces is as much a part of the scene as the explosions. By the time it's over, you're left with that hollow, heavy-feeling veterans say is the closest thing to the truth. Platoon didn't just win Best Picture, it changed how Vietnam was portrayed in movies, and it all starts with the kind of battle sequence that refuses to let you sit comfortably in your seat. Tora, 1970, Attack on Pearl Harbor, 1941. Before Michael Bay turned Pearl Harbor into a love story with explosions, there was Tora, and it remains the most accurate cinematic version of the 1941 attack. This wasn't just an American production. It was a joint effort between U.S. and Japanese filmmakers, with each side telling their part of the story. The battle scenes are built from 3 years of research and 8 months of shooting. The filmmakers consulted military historians, including Ladislas Farrago, and brought in technical advisors who had actually been involved in the real attack. Richard Fleischer directed the American sequences, while Toshio Masuda and Kinji Fukasaku handled the Japanese side, giving the film a rare balance. From the miscommunications in the lead-up to the strike to the attack itself, the sequence follows the actual timeline of events. The explosions, the strafing runs, the smoke pouring from ships, it's as close as you'll get to seeing Pearl Harbor unfold in real time. Now, it's not flawless. They used the USS Yorktown as a stand-in for ships that weren't available, and some of the Japanese planes were actually repainted trainers with incorrect markings. If you're an aviation purist, you'll spot those errors instantly, but these are small blemishes in an otherwise meticulous recreation. What makes Tora stand out is its commitment to both perspectives. It's not just about the shock of the attack, it's about the buildup, the planning, and the human errors that made it possible. The result is a battle scene that educates as much as it impresses, and it does it without sacrificing cinematic punch. Dunkirk, 2017, Operation Dynamo, 1940. Christopher Nolan didn't set out to make a character-driven war epic. Dunkirk isn't about one hero's story, it's about survival itself. The evacuation of over 300,000 Allied troops from the beaches of France in 1940 is recreated with surgical precision, and Nolan's battle sequences are built almost entirely from first-hand accounts. The Royal Air Force dogfights are a perfect example of this accuracy. Pilots really did have to conserve fuel so carefully that they could spend less than an hour over Dunkirk before heading back to England. Most of their fighting happened over the Channel, far from the soldiers on the sand. That's why many survivors later swore they never saw the RAF during the evacuation. They were there, just beyond the horizon, cutting off incoming German planes. The beach scenes nail the physical and psychological tension. You see soldiers waiting for rescue while knowing they're sitting targets. You feel the claustrophobia on the pier, the chaos when a ship gets hit, the gut punch of realizing the destroyers you can see offshore aren't coming closer because they're being held back for the defense of Britain. Nolan also resisted the urge to fill the film with CGI. Real ships, real planes, and practical effects dominate. The result is a battle sequence that doesn't just show what happened, it shows how it felt to be there. Every ticking moment matters. Dunkirk's power lies in restraint. It doesn't lecture you on the stakes. It lets the precision of the events, the sounds of incoming fire, and the desperate scramble for survival tell the story. For a war movie that's light on dialogue, it says more about battlefield reality than most scripts twice as long. Saving Private Ryan, 1998. Omaha Beach Landing, 1944. This is the scene every other war movie gets measured against. The opening of Saving Private Ryan doesn't just show the D-Day landing, it forces you to live it. Steven Spielberg built the 23-minute Omaha Beach sequence from survivor interviews, combat footage, and military records, recreating the chaos shot for shot. From the moment the landing craft ramps drop, you're thrown into a nightmare. The German machine guns are invisible, the noise is deafening, and the soldiers are disoriented before they've even hit the sand. Spielberg refused to sanitize anything. Bodies in the surf, medics overwhelmed, officers killed mid-order. The production spent $11 million on this sequence alone. More than 1,000 extras were used, including members of the Irish Army Reserve. At least 20 were amputees fitted with prosthetic limbs to realistically depict battlefield injuries. Every shot is grounded in historical accuracy, from the weight of the gear to the placement of the German fortifications. Spielberg thought audiences might walk out. Instead, veterans said it was the closest they'd ever seen to the real thing, so close that some couldn't finish watching. The sequence doesn't build toward a heroic charge or a clean victory. It ends with exhausted, traumatized soldiers finally making it off the beach, because that's how it happened. It's brutal, it's unrelenting, and it set a new standard for historical war filmmaking. More than 25 years later, no one has topped it. Black Hawk Down, 2001. Battle of Mogadishu, 1993. Black Hawk Down isn't a sweeping war epic. It's a street-level account of a real mission that went sideways in the worst possible way. Based on Mark Bowden's book, it follows the 1993 U.S. Army Ranger and Delta Force mission in Mogadishu, Somalia, that spiraled into an overnight fight for survival. The battle scenes are brutally faithful to what happened. The film shows the actual sequence of events: the raid to capture warlord lieutenants, the downing of the first Black Hawk helicopter, and the frantic efforts to secure crash sites while under constant fire. The geography of the city, the distances soldiers had to cover on foot, the angles of fire from rooftops, all match eyewitness reports and after-action accounts. Ridley Scott leaned heavily on military advisors, including real veterans of the battle, to ensure everything from the weapon handling to the radio chatter sounded right. The soldiers' gear, the uniforms, even the way they carried themselves, were based on photographic evidence and interviews with survivors. One of the most striking aspects is how the film captures the confusion. Units get separated, orders are garbled, and soldiers suddenly find themselves pinned down in places they never planned to be. There's no clean hero moment, just a desperate effort to survive until extraction. Some events are condensed for pacing, but the intensity is authentic. Veterans of the battle have said the film is as close as you can get to understanding what those 18 hours were like without having been there. It's loud, chaotic, and unforgiving, exactly as it should be. Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006. Defense of Iwo Jima, 1945. Most war movies show Iwo Jima from the American perspective. Clint Eastwood's Letters from Iwo Jima flips it, telling the story from the Japanese side, and it's one of the most historically accurate depictions of the battle ever made. The battle scenes are based on letters written by Japanese soldiers who were there, combined with military records and survivor interviews. The film recreates the underground tunnel systems, the defensive positions, and the Japanese strategy to drag out the fight for as long as possible. These aren't guesses. The layouts were mapped from actual wartime blueprints. Unlike most depictions of Japanese troops as faceless enemies, this film humanizes them without softening the reality. You see the fear, the desperation, and the resourcefulness of soldiers facing overwhelming odds. The weapons, uniforms, and even the conditions in the tunnels, heat, poor ventilation, and constant bombardment, are portrayed exactly as described in first-hand accounts. The combat scenes capture the shifting nature of the fight. Brutal close-quarters exchanges inside the tunnels, sudden artillery strikes, and nighttime raids. Eastwood doesn't romanticize the battle or offer neat victories, just the grim reality of defending a doomed position. It's rare to see a war film so committed to accuracy while telling a side of the story that had been almost completely ignored in Western cinema. Letters from Iwo Jima doesn't just recreate history, it expands our understanding of it. Zulu, 1964, Battle of Rorke's Drift, 1879. Zulu is one of those films where the truth is already so remarkable you don't need to change much. It depicts the 1879 Battle of Rorke's Drift in the Anglo-Zulu War, when about 150 British and colonial troops defended a small mission station against an assault by roughly 4,000 Zulu warriors. The battle scenes are built from military reports, eyewitness accounts, and the official citations for the Victoria Cross medals awarded afterward. The geography of the mission station, the placement of the barricades, and the use of ammunition are all spot on. Even the sequence of attacks, probing strikes, massed assaults, nighttime harassment is drawn directly from historical records. The filmmakers also went to lengths to show the Zulu side with respect. Real Zulu extras were used, and their weapons, shields, and formations were recreated based on expert consultation. The film accurately portrays the horns of the buffalo tactic, a classic Zulu battlefield maneuver. The battle itself plays out in real time, showing the defenders' exhaustion, the dwindling supplies, and the sheer improbability of holding out. By the end, you're left with the same disbelief historians still feel, that such a small force managed to survive against those odds. Zulu has its share of small historical liberties, mostly in character interactions, but when it comes to the battle itself, it's a masterclass in recreating the past without losing the drama. War movies will always take liberties, it's part of the medium, but these battle scenes prove that when filmmakers respect the facts, the result can be more gripping than anything you could make up. Which of these felt the most real to you? Or did we miss one that deserves a place on the list? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe, and keep digging into the moments where cinema and history meet head-on. Sometimes the truth really is more intense than fiction.